Hello guys, this is the Gaming Analyst. Today we're going to be analyzing the game Batman Arkham Knight. After having played Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad, I felt it was time to revisit this masterpiece after almost 10 years since it had been released. What we are going to do today is be looking at mainly the story, its presentation, and themes that the game offers. And on the gameplay side, we're going to be looking at combat, traversal, and puzzles. So let's get into it. Okay, so let me start this segment by first talking about my overall thoughts about the story of Arkham Knight. It is average at best. That is my overall take on it. And the reason why I say this is because the story tries to be too complex and it doesn't work out. The game tries to be too many things at once. There are two overarching storylines, and I feel like the developers wanted to somehow set up a big payoff at the end of the game where everything connects together and we're given this big gigantic reveal about how it all ties in, and they try to do that at the end with a very cinematic sequence. If you've seen it, I won't spoil it for you. However, it does not work the way the developers wanted. The game kind of falls flat, and ultimately, it leads to a very disappointing end. Okay, so let's get into the story first. Now, the story of Batman Arkham Knight is average at best. And the reason I say this is because not that it reaches too little, or not that there's not enough writing put into it, but rather because it's too complex. I think the developers overreached, or sorry, not the developers, the writers. I think the writers overreached and tried to do too many things at once, make the story too complex. I think they were setting this up as the big grand finale of the Batman Arkham trilogy and wanted to end off on a high note. And you can see you can see that they were trying to set up so many different subplot points to support this big finale in the end, but it doesn't really work out that well, and ultimately it really falls flat. Now, on your initial run through, you're kind of left with the sense of awe, but after the like Spider-Man 2, after the initial excitement has worn off and you get a real analysis, you do a real analysis on it, you really sit and think about it, you realize it's not all that great in reality. And that is honestly my reason, that is my reasoning for why the story is average. Another reason that I would give is that the game tries to do too many things at once. Initially, you're introduced to Scarecrow, who is touted as the main villain of this game, Good choice. We had enough of Joker over 3 games if we're including Origins. He was overused at that point. He's got 3 good games. We're happy, and I was excited to see a new villain from Batman's Rogue Gallery to be introduced as the main villain, and Scarecrow was as good as option as any. And but you kind of feel like, okay, what's he gonna do? And then you're introduced to a new original character at the time, the Arkham Knight, and you realize, okay, now we can see how Scarecrow is, going to be touted as the main villain. He's got a good and reliable sidekick in. I don't know if he's a sidekick or partner, but you know, you've got someone who can face Batman in terms of combat, in terms of wits, in terms of technology, and throughout the game, you're given these instances where he kind of just bests Batman by just a little bit. It adds to the mystique of the character, and you realize, okay, you can see where the game is headed. And then out of nowhere, the Joker comes back in a very Joker-esque fashion. He's now infiltrated the minds of 4 random people, and you're given a pretty visual clue that Batman's the last person who is infected, and it was a nice surprise, unnecessary but nice, because like I said earlier, I'd had enough of the Joker at this point. I was like, let's go for someone new, man. But I'm guessing, it being an Arkham game, they felt the need to just give him one last indulgence. You have Kevin Conroy, you have Mark Hamill as voice actors. I mean, why not make the best use of them? And at this point, you're kind of shifting attention from between Scarecrow to the Arkham Knight. One might give the argument that Scarecrow and the Arkham Knight are the same villain, but towards the end of the game, you can see that each has their own diverging path. And the other path is the Joker sequence at the movie studios, and they're constantly shifting attention between the three. Now, I imagine the writers were thinking of the pressure piling up on Batman and how he's not able to manage all 3 villains at once, and the pressure's getting to him. This somehow causes the Joker within him to come out more and more as he's starting to lose more of his allies, as he's failing as Batman, and this gives reason for the Joker to come out in his psyche. And it's a very good storyline. If it had been executed properly, I can see this being a grand finale for Batman. But it doesn't. And it falls very flat, very badly. And at the end of the story, you're just like, okay. I mean, not on your initial playthrough, but in subsequent playthroughs, you're like, okay, it's it. You see, the Batman Arkham Knight, or rather, Rocksteady, is a studio that I hold in high regard, as Naughty Dog or as Sucker Punch, who have produced games like The Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us. And when you look at Arkham City, which is many fans' favorite game, you can see why. Because they wrote a story in Arkham City that was as high a quality as those other games. So it is only natural to expect something like that in Arkham Knight. However, the game fails to do that, and honestly, the only reason why I feel like this game failed in the story aspect is because we as fans set a high standard for them with good reason to, but ultimately it didn't deliver, and I think that's why it ended up where it did. Next, let's look at side quests. Now, a good game has a good story. Take The Last of Us, for example, or a Plague Tale, or the Plague Tale series. Good game, good story. Let's stop with that. Now, a great game has a great story and great side quests. And I think that's the difference. And that is a key difference between good games and great games, the side quests. Arkham Knight, however, does not have great side quests. In fact, they don't even have good side quests. They just have side quests. The reason I tell you this is because side quest is supposed to add lore, or expand upon the world beyond the main story of the game, or that they're trying to tell, or maybe tie in relevant tie in relevant themes that the main story is trying to tell in other short encounters with random side characters and build a budding relationship, or maybe it tells us more about the main character and their motivations. Ultimately, side quests, expand the world or expand the character and give something meaningful to the player in return for diverging from the main story. However, Arkham Knight does not do that. None of the side quests add anything meaningful. World building is almost little to none. There's no particular reason why you should do them. Most of the world building that you get in game is when you traverse through the game and you hear these bits of radio chatter across different comm channels, and you get bits and tidbits about how things have come to this state, and the various roles that certain NPCs play here and there throughout the game. And I think that was very well executed. However, the side stories part are very bad. A simple example that I'll give you is the Firefly side quest. Now, let's do a comparison between Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight. In Arkham Origins, Firefly was a one note character. Same as in Knight, he's a one note character, just wants to burn everything in Gotham. He's a psychopath, okay? There's no explanation for psychopaths. However, the way they executed him in Origins was very good. They gave him an entire sequence, a boss fight. It was honestly incredibly fun just to do that sequence when I remember playing it. And although he is a one note side character, it's fun. I didn't really think about that when I was playing it in Origins. It tied into the story about the assassins trying to kill Batman and all. It tied it into his theme about wanting to burn Gotham. And overall, and the most important thing, I had fun. And I think that's all that matters at the end. The same cannot be said in this case, however, as again, yes, he's again, I've said it before, one note side character. However, the gameplay aspect of it is questionable because it's basically a race, or not even a race. You're just waiting and you're just playing catch up with this guy until his fuel runs out, at which point you just engage him in a beatdown. You do this enough times and that's the side quest. And yes, there is an entire other quest with regards to the firefighters and how they're getting laid off in that's very reminiscent of today. But yeah, there is a whole story to this situation. But I feel like it could have been executed better, and it would have made Firefly seem like a competent villain at the end. But again, that's one of the small instances. Another is let me see.
Thus, to conclude this segment, all I have to say is that the side quests in this game are good, but they can be better. There's a lot of room for improvement in certain aspects of this game. A key thing that we should take is that we should note is that it isn't unfair of the players to expect a certain standard of storytelling and gameplay from a tried and tested studio like Rocksteady after they have made amazing and critically acclaimed video games such as Batman Arkham City, Arkham Origins, and Asylum. And that's all I have to say about that.
Now, let's talk about traversal. Traversal and movement in the trilogy has seen nothing but constant improvement throughout the development of all three games. Players can feel a vivid difference after playing each installment, and Arkham Knight has not only improved the gliding mechanic, but also introduced an altogether new one, that is, the Batmobile. Now, let's deep dive into its pros and cons. Traversal and movement in each game was always scaled to its size. Thus, Asylum's was comparatively a very restrictive experience. Arkham City, on the other hand, a major improvement as the larger map allowed players to fully spread their wings. No? Okay, sorry. More areas to explore, elevation of various kinds, and a smoother handling system gave players a very enjoyable experience, with a lot of credit going to the constant radio chatter to keep our dopamine-fried brains occupied whilst traversing from place to place. Arkham Knight does all of this, but even better. More faster, more smoother, just more. Keeping in mind the size of Gotham City, the developers made the conscious decision to make all the necessary improvements to make the world feel large, not only feel large, but also to make the player fast enough to traverse all of it. And of course, the Batmobile, the one addition that players had long anticipated. Whilst aerial traversal had already been solved and optimized by gliding over 3 games, ground traversal needed more than running. Enter the Batmobile. Not only did it make moving around the map easier, but also gave the players a new gameplay mechanic in terms of riddler races, ACP chases, puzzles, tank battles, and boss fights. Tank boss fights, so to speak. So, how did this concept, which sounds so good on paper, fail in the actual game? The answer is in the fact that we get too much of the Batmobile and not enough of Batman. Arkham City as a whole keeps raising the stakes and standards when it comes to its storytelling. Boss fights are varied, reveals are jaw dropping, combat requires you to adapt to new situations very quickly. This is what makes the game so memorable. However, in the case of Arkham Knight, the Batmobile is just overused. The game traded the variety that it had in City for a new mechanic that, whilst it is absolutely enjoyable to play, it loses its fun factor over repetitive use over an extended period of time. Also, the lack or rather absence of boss fights does not help their case. And most importantly, this is a personal gripe of mine. Why am I stealthy in a goddamn tank? Like, the introduction of the Cobra tanks midway through the game was by far one of the most annoying updates or annoying new enemies that I had to face, as it practically made every single upgrade I made available for the Batmobile worthless. So, the Arkham Knight's only flaw, thus, Arkham Knight's only flaw with its traversal, or rather with the Batmobile and its gameplay, is that there's too much of it and not enough of Batman. Lastly, let's dive into combat. Needless to say, the penultimate game in the Arkham Knight trilogy has the best combat to offer in the entire series. The new Batsuit that we get a few hours into the game only teases the possibilities of destruction and mayhem that we would be capable of. 10 years after the game released, and still people post videos on YouTube about fast and prolonged combat encounters with very high combo meters, along with creative and satisfying stealth takedowns. That's just how good beating thugs feels in this game. Whilst the learning curve is a bit steep for new players, the experience is still there. The gadget system allows for new, creative, and visually stunning ways to knock out opponents. Now, as much as I love this game, I must say the Batmobile's combat is absolutely amazing for the initial few hours. See, whilst it is a new fun mechanic to blast tanks with, it gets old. Moreover, it also becomes redundant towards the later sections of the game. The upgrades for the Batmobile make you destroy tanks faster, but the rush that a player experiences whilst beating up people and maintaining a high combo streak, you can't match that. Not by, clicking a button and just blasting away. The sense of satisfaction, it just isn't there. Something is fundamentally missing. Also, the addition of the Cobra tanks does not help at all, as all the upgrades for the Batmobile become, for lack of a better word, useless. As a player, you don't want to be lurking around in a freaking tank. You want to be able to go up to the opponent and shoot him in the face. but the Cobra tank completely negates all functionality of the Batmobile, and you're back to being a scared mouse again. It makes the player's upgrades to the car feel meaningless. And lastly, boss battles. I only have one question when it comes to boss battles. Where are they? Okay, maybe more than one question. Why are they not there? Whose decision was it to not introduce them into the game? And God forbid, if anyone tells me that the Deathstroke fight at the end of the game was a boss battle, you, please, we have nothing to speak to each other. One of the biggest mainstays of the original game, of the not the original games, the previous games, was boss battles. We had varied, boss battles. In Arkham Origins we had the Firefly boss battle, we had the Bane boss battles in Asylum and Origins, and there was a Scarecrow segment in Asylum, and each of the bosses in Arkham Origins, each of them gave us a fun interactive way to deal with them. And none of that is there in this game. Apart from the tank battles, they just don't exist, and the tank battles don't have enough variety to be a good enough replacement for normal combat. And overall, I feel like whilst the initial premise of combat was well set up, the execution towards the end, it just didn't match. Thus, in conclusion, Batman Arkham Knight is a game that, while graphically has withstood the test of time, even today it looks absolutely amazing. The shortcomings that were present on the release day, they still prevail today. Story discrepancies, writing blunders, the Batmobile segments, combat segments. I've already been through all of this. Thus, this makes Arkham City the best game of the series. But on an overall basis, across all video games, I'd say Batman Arkham Knight is a solid 7. It was incredibly fun to play. I had a great time with it. Sure, it gets a bit draggy towards the end, gets a bit repetitive, and the story gets a bit muddled up. It's not the best story out there, but it is one that works. It's a solid game, and I think it's worth your while if you have the time to buy it. It's extremely cheap nowadays on Steam. So yeah, have fun with it. Don't let me decide. Uh, Hopefully this review helped you, and hope you enjoy the game if you ever decide to buy it. I would certainly recommend you do it, but just don't have the same expectations as you had for City. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you like my content, please do subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot. Like this video if you give it a thumbs up. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you for the next one. Stay safe, guys. Goodbye.